Okay, and we're live once again dito sa ating discussion ng workforce planning process. Let us continue discussing yung step number 4, which is demand forecasting. Tapos na tayo sa identifying step 5 na pala to, no? Step 5 rather. Okay. Kasi natapos natin yung step 1, kung sino ba yung mga stakeholders. Step 2, determining the planning horizon. Step 3, defining the internal and external labor supply or labor force rather. And then step 4 will be forecasting supply. And step 5 would be demand forecasting. Okay? So, natapos na natin yung mga 4 steps. And now we have here now in our step 5, forecasting demand. Okay? How many workers do we actually need? Okay, that is the question that we are answering here in demand forecasting. Okay, the process of estimating how many workers in which specific roles the organization will need at a defined future point in time to achieve its planned business objectives. So the central question is very simple in demand forecasting: how many people do we need and in which positions? So dito we are not just going to guess the number, no, but to systematically project yung ating workforce requirements based on business plans, based on operational realities and historical data. Just like in forecasting supply, we also have two approaches or methods here: quantitative and qualitative approach. Okay, so each approach has its own usage and meron silang specific circumstances or scenarios where they can be used. So most organizations can or will use both methods, quantitative and qualitative methods. So let's start with the quantitative one. So quantitative methods are statistical, data-driven approaches. They use historical patterns and mathematical models to project headcounts ng isang nakailangan ng isang organization. So let's say for example, if sales volume increased by 40%, how many employees do we need? Yung mga ganong mga statements. If we historically need one employee for ganitong revenue, how many employees do we need when revenue reaches this amount, so on and so forth. Okay? So, itong mga quantitative methods are excellent for operational, volume-driven roles, such like, for example, sa ating example na Cafe Cordillera. Ito yung ano ba yung mga volume-driven na mga trabaho: barista, serving customers, cashiers, processing transactions, kitchen staff, preparing food items. Okay? So, quantitative methods are used in this operational and volume-driven roles. Bakit? Because there's a measurable relationship between business activity and headcount. Okay? Yan yung ating quantitative. Sa qualitative naman, this type of demand forecasting relies on management expertise and judgment. So, qualitative methods capture yung mga roles that numbers alone cannot predict, such as leadership positions, specialized functions, strategic roles where the link to business volume isn't mechanical. Okay? So, yung mga position, for example, sa Cafe Cordillera, yung mga branch manager, ship supervisor, mga ganyan, no? Na kailangan mo in each location. Not because of a formula told us to do so, to hire one branch manager in each location, but because operationally, each branch requires a manager. Okay? So, they are not driven by other business variables, okay, or specific business variables, but based on the need, okay, based on organizational other organizational factors. Okay, for example, when we need an HR specialist, when we hit 50 employees, those were not derived by revenue, okay, and customer, but from regulatory compliance and span of control realities. Okay, so most organizations ginagamit yan. Yung kaya nga hybrid. Quantitative methods are blind to leadership layers. That's why you use qualitative methods. Kaya meron tayong hybrid approach to give you the best of both worlds. Okay, we use quantitative methods to project frontline operational roles. Use qualitative methods to identify leadership, specialists, and strategic positions. So, you combine them, mas maganda, mas accurate yung ating demand forecast. Okay, let's start with the first quantitative method in forecasting demand. We have here ratio analysis. Ratio analysis derives staffing requirements from a known and stable relationship between a measurable business variable and the number of employees needed. Okay, very simple logic in here. Ilan yung ating required staff equals the projected business volume divided by the ratio basis per employee. So you have to identify first a measurable business variable, establish the ratio per employee, and apply it to our projected volume. So there are 5 types of ratio. Staffing ratio. So ibig sabihin yung customer clients served per employees. So ginagamit yan if the work is being driven by direct service to people. Example sa ating coffee shop. In a coffee shop, serves 30 customers per barista per day. That is staffing ratio. Then we have output ratio. Units produced per employees. When to use kapag nasa production-based and countable work. For example, nasa bakery ka. Bakery produce 200 loaves of bread per baker per shift. Mga ganyan. We also have here revenue ratio. Ibig sabihin, ito yung revenue generated per employee. When to use. Kapag meron tayong financial output, most consistent measure. Example, sa restaurant, generates 500,000 revenue per employee per month, mga ganun. Transaction ratio, transactions processed by employee, when to use, administrative and volume trackable work. For example, cashier. A cashier process 120 transactions per shift. And then we have area ratio, physical zone covered by employees. This is being used when your work is based on coverage of geographic rather than volume based. For example, security guard. So in one security guard covers 5,000 square meters per shift. Okay, so you have to remember na ang key strength ng ratio analysis, it is using historical operational data rather than estimates or assumptions. Always remember that. It is based on historical operational data. That's why this becomes a reliable deployment benchmark for any projected future volumes because you're not guessing. You're applying a proven operational pattern. So it works best when the 4 conditions are being met. Business output is measurable in countable units. Ratio is stable across locations, seasons, or context. Meron tayong historical data para mas maging reliable yung ating benchmark, and this is being used to volume-driven frontline operational positions. So kung yan ay present, ratio analysis is highly reliable. Then we have here the limitations. Medyo lesser use ito or appropriate ito for mga roles na mayroong organizational complexity, decision making, especially pag mga managerial and leadership positions na. Okay, so it is advisable to use now managerial estimation, which is part of the qualitative methods. Okay, kasi yung mga nakalagay dito na positions are based on org structure, not on customer volume. Okay? So let's try to apply ratio analysis sa ating Cafe Cordillera. Okay, the first step would be to establish first staffing ratio based on the flagship operating data, based doon sa current na branch niya doon sa Session Road. Okay? So there are three steps here. Let's start with establishing staffing ratio from flagship operating data. So step 1 will be to determine with certainty doon sa kanyang ano ba yung nangyari sa kanyang flagship store doon sa kanyang current operations. So the flagship store currently serves 150 customers per day with the following head count. Nandyan na yung ating head count. So 150, ilan ang barista na kailangan to serve 150 customers? 5. Ilan ang cashier na kailangan nila para makapag-serve ng 150? 2. Ilan ang kitchen staff na kinailangan nila para makaserve ng 150 customers? 1. Okay? So, nandyan yung mga kailangan natin. In every 150 customers, kailangan natin ng 5 barista, 2 cashier, 1 kitchen prep staff. So, each staffing ratio is derived directly from the actual records ng ating flagship branch. So, hindi siya estimate, hindi siya assumed data. Para yung ating data is empirically grounded and they can defensively apply to all locations that, especially 3 branches already. Okay, so this flagship ratio can become now our service deployment benchmark that will be applied to branch 1, branch 2, and branch 3 doon sa target natin na branches in 2027. So that's step 1, establishing staffing ratio based on the operating data of our flagship branch. Step 2 will now be projecting the daily customer volumes for all 3 branches. Okay, so now Marisol must project how many customer each branch will serve daily. Okay, so makikita natin dito that the methodology differs between flagship and the new branches. So again, the data that we will be getting here, yung ating cafe conversion rate and yung ating estimated daily foot traffic will be based on our flagship store. Okay, and for the 2 branches, merong na-conduct na feasibility study that estimates yung mga foot traffic and applies a calculated cafe conversion rate based on this foot traffic. So how did Marisol derive the conversion rate? So it's a very simple computation that is based on the flagship data. So yung 6% nakuha dito sa flagship data. Okay, 150 customers, 25 daily pedestrians, yung mga foot traffic na dumadaan sa kanyang store. So that's 6% cafe conversion rate. Ibig sabihin, from the 25 na dumaan doon sa kanyang coffee shop, napadaan doon, nakita yung kanilang coffee shop, 6% or 150 of the 2,500 entered the shop and bought coffee. Okay? And then, ganun din yung estimate nila sa SM, 2.5 din. Ito yung conservative pa lang. Conservative year estimate. Pero baka mas madami kapag nasa actual operation na lang. So, para naman hindi na masyadong mataas yung expectation natin. So, conservatively, 2.5 pareho dun sa flagship. Kasi minsan, yung mga pumupunta ng SM, pumupunta din sa Session Road, dumadaan dyan. So, parang pareho na lang for a more conservative estimate. Year 1 pa lang naman yan. Sa La Trinidad, medyo mas konti ang tao. Okay? So, mas konti yung kanilang nabilang na pedestrian na dumadaan doon sa kanilang shop. Okay, pero 6% pa rin yung conversion rate. So, 90 naman ang projected daily customer dito sa La Trinidad Benguet na ating branch. Okay? So, with this estimated daily customers in step 3, we can now determine how many employees would we need in each branch. Okay? Yan, ito na tayo. So, step 3, now we could now apply the ratio from step 1 and then doon sa projected customer volume from step 2. So, required staff, ang formula natin dito equals projected daily customers divided by staffing ratio. Okay, so i-divide lang natin yan. Yung customer and then doon sa staffing ratio natin. So, yan dyan, 1 per 30 customer, 1 per 75 customer, 1 per 150 customer. Yan yung ating staffing ratio. I-divide natin yan sa mga projected daily customer to come up with these numbers. Okay, so in a flagship, meron tayong 8 na total number of employees for those who are directly dealing with customers na mga positions. Okay, so wala yung mga management and senior roles because basically they don't directly involve themselves in serving the customers. Okay, 8 pareho ang flagship sa SM Baguio. Now, in here, there's a difference because of the projected daily customers. 90 lang. So, that's 5. So, pag inad mo yan, it's a total of 21. Okay? 21 employees. Okay. Na directly na makikipag-involve sa mga customers who will be serving our customers. Okay? But this only covers yung mga operational roles. So, we still have to determine later on ilan ang kailangan natin sa mga management at saka mga senior positions. Okay? So, all in all, we have 21 operational roles based on ratio analysis. Pero, nakalagay na dito kung ilan ba ang kailangan natin sa management, but we will be explaining later kung bakit nakuha yung 15. Paano nakuha yung 15. So, all in all, there will be needed natin, ang demand natin is 36 employees kapag nag-open na yung ating tatlong branches. Okay? So, yan yung 3-step process that demonstrate how ratio analysis works in practice. Okay, so this is an evidence-based workforce planning. Okay, next method is the trend analysis. So, ito naman, it's a different demand forecasting method with a different purpose. Okay, ang trend analysis, we examine historical data across multiple time periods to identify consistent directional relationships between a business variable and employee headcount, then project that relationship forward. Okay, so it looks similar to the ratio analysis, but let me provide the key distinction. So, yung ratio analysis kasi, it asks how many employees do we need to serve this volume of customers. Okay? Yun yung ating sinasagot dyan. Yan yung operational requirements. Ilan ang kailangan natin para ma-serve yung mga customer natin. Ang trend analysis asks the question, how many employees can our projected revenue actually or can actually sustain. So, it's more of a financial sustainability question. Yung ratio analysis is about operational capacity, physically staffing the branch. Trend analysis is about financial reality. Can the business afford the payroll? Okay, 36 ang kailangan natin na empleyado. Ang tanong is, kaya ko bang paswelduhan lahat yung 36? So we will be determining kung kaya natin using trend analysis. Okay? Kaya nga itong trend analysis, nagiging meaningful yan after the operational demand table is built, which comes after the ratio analysis. Para ma-validate natin yung numbers or before we commit into hiring people, kailangan muna nating ma-determine if kaya ba nating bayaran. Can we afford to hire 36 employees, for example, sa Cafe Cordillera? Okay? So, kino-compute natin yan based on historical workforce composition. Okay? Let's say, for example, in the Cafe Cordillera, 36 yung demand natin, di ba? Yan yung kinakailangan natin para sa ating 3 branches. So, we look at the historical data ng ating organization. Based on the 5-year operations ng ating single branch, ito yung kanyang revenue per employee. Yan yung ratio. Yan. Revenue per employee. And in-average yan in a 5-year kasi mas conservative. Mas maganda na i-base natin yan based on 5-year average, not just on the year 5. Okay? Para ma-smooth out natin yung year-to-year fluctuations and provide more reliable benchmark. So, yan yung exact number, but we have to round it conservatively. Okay, round down natin para kung meron mang pagkulang sa ating revenue, mas viable ito. So, conservative approach for expansion safety. So, this is a very prudent decision for financial planning. Okay. So, yan. Conservative approach for expansion safety so that we could protect against downside risks. So, ibig sabihin, ang in-expect natin sa 2027 is that in every 29,000 yung revenue per employee. So, yan yung binibigay na revenue, kino-contribute na revenue ng isang empleyado. So, let's try to see. Let's try to compute the revenue. Okay? So, 150 customers. Let's try to apply itong 29,000 to verify if yung ating monthly revenue projected for 2027 for 3 branches can support 36 employees. Tignan natin. So, we have here first the average transaction value. Compute muna natin yan based on our monthly revenue. Yan. Tignan natin, ha? 400,000. So, ibig sabihin, divided by 150 times 30 days, that's, ibig sabihin, yung average transaction value natin is that in every customer na pumunta sa ating coffee shop will give us 89 pesos. Yan, 89 pesos. Okay, and then, i-multiply natin yan. And then, we have here, we will serve 390 customers per month times 89. That's approximately, okay, rounded na to, 1,040,000. And then, divided by the 29,000 pesos revenue per employee equals to 36 employees. So, what does this mean? So, anong ibig sabihin yan? So, ibig sabihin, yung plano ni Marisol to hire based on the forecasting demand, we could or she could actually sustain. So, ibig sabihin, revenue supports all 36 positions, expansion can proceed with confidence, and there is financial viability. Okay? So, by using ratio analysis to determine kung ilan yung kailangan niyang empleyado to operationally run all 3 branches, 36 yon. The trend analysis confirmed that the business can afford 36 employees financially based on projected revenue. Okay, so pag nag-match yung mga yan, when operational requirements and financial sustainability align perfectly, anong mangyayari? Marisol can have a defensible, evidence-based workforce plan ready for execution. Okay? So, that's how we use ratio and trend analysis together. Okay, pasadahan na lang natin to mga ibang methods. Okay, pero hindi naman natin masyadong gagamitin tong mga to. In fact, natin gagamitin sa ating klase. But for large organizations, for organizations who are operating already for 10 years, mga 5 years, 10 years na ganyan, pwede nilang gamitin itong regression analysis. Okay? So, this is a mathematical way of finding and measuring yung business pattern to determine kung ilan ang kailangan nilang empleyado. Okay, so gumagamit sila ng mga years of historical data. For example, yung kanilang mga revenue figures and staffing levels. Then they will plot the relationship between these variables and builds a model. Okay, and once that model is built, they could now forecast kung ilan ang kakailanganin nilang empleyado. Okay, yan yung big idea dito sa regression analysis. You are looking into your historical business patterns to predict future people needs. Yan yung concept ng regression analysis. Anyway, kapag kayo naging manager in the future, you don't just compute ito manually naman. Meron tayong mga software who could do the computation. Ang kailangan mo lang malaman is what you need to know, kung kailang gamitin, ano yung mga data na kailangan, and how to interpret the results. Okay? So, ang regression analysis finds the pattern between business activity and staffing needs. Then, it will use that pattern, that mathematical predictability to forecast the future human requirements. Okay, so we have here example from hospital setting na pwedeng applicable ang regression analysis dito. Tignan mo dito sa part na to, kung ratio ang gagamitin natin, hindi maganda. Kasi paiba-iba yung ratio niya every year. Okay? So, it's not enough that we use ratio analysis. Okay? So, we try to look at the historical data and then ano yung mga other variables na kailangan natin i-consider, and then mathematically we use the regression analysis to compute for this one and project our manpower requirements. Okay, so wag tayo masyadong ma-scare dito sa formula na yan. Okay, normally it's easy to understand kapag we make time to study this concept. Okay, so yan yung regression. Papiyaw lang for awareness lang yan. And then we have here another quantitative forecasting method. We have time series analysis. Yeah. Time series, parang yung mga seasonal planning ito, di ba? Alam nyo naman sa Pilipinas, Meron tayong mga tinatawag na peak season, lean season, okay? Merong mga product and services na mabenta kapag mga holiday season, kapag mga season na walang masyadong mga activities. For example, from September to December, yung mga bear months, di ba? Mga Christmas mode na yan. So, tumataas ang mall foot traffic, maraming pumupunta sa mall, maraming pumupunta sa mga coffee shop, sa mga restaurant, sa mga kainan. Di ba? Pag mga Holy Week, yan, di ba? March, April, and everything either stops completely, mga ganyan, or dumadami ang mga turista, depende dun sa location ninyo. And pag mga summer season, yan, dumadami ang mga estudyante. Rainy season, bumabagal ang benta, school opening, titrigger yan ng mga additional spending. So, yan yung mga predictable cycles that repeats every single year na pwedeng maka-apekto doon sa requirements natin ng ating mga human resources. Yan yung kinakapture ng time series analysis. It looks at your historical data, organize them by month or quarter, identifies these recurring patterns, and use them to project your future staffing needs before each cycle arrives. Okay? For example, sa mga coffee shop dito sa Pilipinas, di ba? Ano ba yung mga peak periods sa Philippines? Especially pag sa Baguio. Normally, mga September, December. Tapos kapag mga summer season, mga ganyan, mga Panagbenga Festival, dumadami ang tao dyan sa Baguio. Okay? So, pag dumadami ang tao, dumadami rin ang customer, and sometimes dumadami rin ang kailangan na empleyado to cover yung volume ng customer na yan. Okay, meron din tayong mga low periods, di ba? Yung mga rainy season, ano pa ba? Kapag konti na yung mga turista, konti na yung mga pumupunta sa Baguio, nag-drop yung customer count. Okay? So, importante na makita natin yung mga peak season, moderate, yung mga regular lang na operation, business days natin, then low, yung mga lean season, para hindi tayo mag-guess when to hire. So, the calendar will tell us if peak season, ganito, then we could start training or hiring temporary employees, etc. Okay, so yun yung concept ng time series. Okay, pero wag tayong ma-confuse with the trend analysis, ha? Kasi magkaiba sila ng sinasagot, di ba? So, ang time series, it determines exactly when the demand go up and when the demand goes down. Okay, because that's the rhythm inside the year. So, ginagamit mo din naman talaga itong dalawang ito. Okay, so time series tells you how to navigate the road as you get there. Trend tells you where you are going. Okay? So, simple lang naman ang concept ng time series. So, dapat hindi sobrang marami ang empleyado mo kapag mga regular season, mga lean season, at hindi ka naman understaff, kulang na empleyado kapag ikaw ay nasa peak season. Kasi mayroong fluctuations minsan ng volume ng mga customers. Okay? Then let's proceed now to the qualitative demand forecasting. So first is we have managerial estimation. Okay? So not all staffing needs can be calculated from customer volume or sales data. Some positions exist simply because the organization needs someone to manage people and complexity regardless of how many cups of coffee are sold or how many patients are admitted. So merong mga part ng business operation na hindi nako-compute mathematically. Okay? So it's a judgment call based on how the organization is structured, and that's what we call managerial estimation. Okay? It's a qualitative method where managers directly estimate how many people their teams will need based on their operational knowledge, planned activities, and organizational structure. Okay, so hindi ito ginagamit sa mga positions na katulad ng mga barista, cashier, production line, frontline staff, because those roles are driven by volume. Could be number of customers, orders, transactions. And for those jobs or positions or roles, you use quantitative methods like ratio analysis, Markov, mga ganyan. Pero kapag mga management positions, supervisory roles, yan, mga supervisory roles, specialist positions, this is exactly the right tool, yung managerial estimation. Because yung mga roles na ganyan are organized not because of how busy you are, but based on how they support and how they not on customer count, but because they have to monitor, supervise the business operations. That's a structural necessity. Kailangan talaga yan. Okay? So, meron tayong ang the best way to do managerial estimation is yung standard allocation role. A pre-established formula based on industry best practices. For example, for every branch needs exactly one branch manager, two shift supervisor because you are operating 16 hours, for example, and one senior barista regardless of size. So that rule is consistent, defensible, and derived from experience, not guesswork. Okay? So, yan yung managerial estimation. Okay, nag-exist yung role na yan. Ginagamit ito sa mga role based on org structure. Okay. For example, sa Cafe Cordillera, ganyan. Siyempre, sa tatlong branches, tig-isang branch manager. Yung shift supervisor, tig-dalawa per branch because you are operating in a 16-hour business operation. So, one shift for the first 8 hours, one shift supervisor for the next 8 hours. Ganun din sa barista and senior barista. Another qualitative method in forecasting demand is scenario planning. Ito naman, scenario planning. Okay. One of the realities in forecasting is that, totoo naman to, the future never unfolds exactly the way you plan. Diba? Business plans sometimes get delayed, permits takes longer, funding falls short. Ibig sabihin, yung single forecast that assumes everything goes perfectly ay hindi naman 100% na nangyayari. There will be disruption, and sometimes what you planned, hindi yun yung nasusunod. Okay? That's why yung mga managers, smart HR planners, don't just build one plan. Meron silang tinatawag na mga contingency plans. Meron silang mga multiple plans for multiple possible futures. Yan yung scenario planning. So instead of asking directly how people will we need, scenario planning will ask how many people will we need if this happens, and if this happens instead, and if the worst happens, you prepare for all of them simultaneously. Okay, so mayroong anong gagawin ko kapag ito yung best case scenario? What if may konting aberya? Ano kayang pwedeng mangyari? Ilang taong kakailanganin ko? What if worst case, ito ang maging mangyari? Ilan ang kailanganin kong empleyado based on some of the triggers here? Okay? So, yan yung concept ng scenario planning. Okay? Because we have to note that there will be uncertainties. Diba? But the lesson in here is uncertainty is not an excuse for poor planning. It's the reason you build multiple plans. So that when reality strikes, you activate a plan and do not panic. And then last qualitative method in forecasting demand is the Delphi method. Delphi method. Okay, ano naman tong Delphi method na to? So, yung mga pinag-usapan natin kanina na mga different methods, yung mga Markov, ratio, time series, regression, all of them needs historical data. Okay, ibig sabihin, yung mga operational data in the years of operation. But what happens when you're venturing into a completely new territory? Diba? Wherein you have a business concept, so bagong-bago, na walang historical data to rely on. Walang single person na merong enough information to make the decision. That's exactly when you use the Delphi method. Instead of relying on numbers, historical data, you gather a panel of experts, ask them independently for their estimates, and through multiple anonymous rounds, you refine those estimates until a reliable consensus emerge. Yeah. So, yun yung mga 5 stages. Hindi ko na yan iisa-isahin, di ba? Kasi hindi naman natin masyadong gagamitin itong Delphi method because most organizations have their own historical data to rely on. But if not, kapag wala tayong historical data to rely on, Delphi gather and refines expert judgment anonymously, turning collective wisdom into a reliable forecast. Okay? Alright, so natapos na tayo sa forecasting demand, yung mga quantitative and qualitative methods. Now, here we go. In putting all together, yung mga kinompute natin, yung mga inestimate natin na mga demand at saka mga supply. So, nandito na tayo. Natapos na natin yung ratio analysis, Markov, succession plan, managerial estimation, trend analysis. So, we all now come together with this full demand forecast summary. Okay? So, notice that hindi lang iisang method ang ginamit dito. Ano? So, we use various methods, ratio, trend, managerial estimate for the management positions because of the organizational structure. Okay? Then we can come up here with the full demand forecast. Dalawa ang kailangan natin na branch manager, 6 na shift supervisor, 5 barista, senior barista, 13 na barista, 5 na cashier, 3 na kitchen prep. And then there's this breakdown now per branches. Okay? But nakikita mo rin dito, time series, analysis, pag mga peak season, mag-hire pa siya ng 3 barista. Okay? Kita ninyo, 13 employees sa ating flagship. Hindi pala pare-pareho ang kailangan na empleyado per branch. And nasagot natin yan kanina kung bakit hindi sila pare-pareho because they don't have the same projection on number of customers to serve daily. Okay? Alright, so that's the full demand forecast. And then we will now match our forecast supply and the demand sa ating step 6 sa gap analysis. So, natapos na natin. We forecasted the demand. We projected internal supply. Now, we compare them side by side, position by position, and ask the critical question, do we have enough people? Meron ba? So, the formula is simple. Forecasted demand minus projected supply. That gap tells us exactly what action we are going to take. There are three possible results: shortage, equilibrium or balance, or labor surplus. Okay? Labor shortage, you need more workers than your internal supply can provide. Labor equilibrium, supply and demand are perfectly balanced or matched. Labor surplus, you have more workers than you actually need. Okay? So, not all gaps are equally urgent. So, titignan mo rin kung saan dyan yung pinaka-priority mo na i-hire mo, pinaka-priority na bigyan mo muna ng attention. Okay, based on lead time, operational prerequisite, and recruitment difficulty. Okay? Which leads us to this next slide. Okay? So, makikita na pag pinag-match natin yung supply at saka demand, ito lang yung supply natin based on the Markov analysis that we have done kanina. Pinumpute natin yung transitional matrix ng movements ng ating mga employees. So, 9. And ang kailangan natin ay 36. So, medyo malaki yung gap because there is a 27 employees na kailangan natin. So, meron labor shortage. Okay? And nakalagay dito per position, actually per position except the general manager na si Marisol, may shortage lahat. Okay? But as you can see, meron tayong mga color coding dyan that would lead us to this next slide. Okay? So we have to make it sure that we are also strategic, okay, in interpreting, not because merong shortage sabay-sabay na nating i-hire yan. Hindi. Sabay-sabay na nating mag-create ng action plan para sa kanila. Hindi. We have to determine kung saan dyan yung may, we have to prioritize them. Saan dyan yung critical na priority natin, high priority, medium priority, and yung very manageable na areas for hiring. Okay? So, the strategic gap analysis prioritizes positions by lead time and operational criticality. So, of course, ang mga branch manager, talagang critical yung mga shift supervisor. Okay, kasi ito yung mga medyo mahirap hanapin, medyo kailangan ng salary negotiations, at saka pag walang branch manager, shift supervisor sa mga branches ninyo, maapektuhan yung business operation. Compared to cashier and kitchen prep, mga barista, mas madaling hanapin yan, mas madaling makinegotiate, mas madaling i-hire, i-target dun sa external recruitment. Okay? Okay, and then lastly, ito last na to, sa ating 7 step ng workforce planning, the solution analysis. Okay, na-identify na natin yung mga gap, and then we are now going to provide solutions. Okay? So, identified yung mga gap, what are we going to do about it? Okay, it converts the gap analysis into a concrete time-bound actions that close its shortage or absorb its surplus before the planning deadline arrives. So this is where our planning becomes now execution. But solutions are not one size fits all, diba? Hindi naman. Okay? The appropriate solution depends on four factors here. The size of the gap, how many positions must be filled, consider yan because the size will determine scale of action. Lead time available, how much time exists before the deadline. Okay, consider din yan. Number 3, the nature of the role. Can it be filled externally with ready talent or it must be developed internally over time? For example, yung mga roles like cashier are readily available in the market, in the labor market. Pero yung mga branch manager, minsan, yan yung mahirap hanapin. Okay, so it requires extensive maybe training, recruitment, and onboarding if hired externally. And the organization's financial capacity, of course. What can be afforded in recruitment, training, and additional salaries. So, kapag hindi, for example, hindi kaya yung mga pasweldo, mga ganyan, so kailangan minsan maging selective din ang mga organization. Okay? And minsan a startup business might have, or small business might be more selective, pero yung established business with strong cash flow have more flexibility in hiring people. Okay? So normally there are two results of the gap analysis na kailangan mabigyan ng action, yung shortage, labor shortage, and labor supply. Okay? So, ito yung mga solutions for shortage. When you don't have enough people, ito yung mga possible na solution. Fast track internal development. Ibig sabihin, you accelerate, i-promote mo yung mga high performers. Okay? Through structured development. Okay? I-train mo sila. Tulungan mo, i-mentor mo sila para maging ready sila sa tina-target mo na position kung saan sila ipo-promote. Okay? And pinaka-common na sagot dito, external recruitment. Attract new talent through job posting, referrals, recruitment agencies, job fairs. Ito yung fastest way to fill gaps when kulang tayo internally. Accelerated training and upskilling. Yan. Skill development to prepare the current employees for roles above their current level. Cross-training. You train employees in multiple roles for flexible coverage during peak periods. For example, yung sa Cafe Cordillera, yung mga cashier mo, pwede mo silang i-cross-train as baristas during bare months rush. Pwede ka rin mag-hire ng mga temporary employees, yung part-time contractual staffing, especially kapag meron tayong mga nasa peak season tayo. Outsourcing, pwede rin yan. You contract third parties for specific functions while building internal capacity long term. Okay? Then, solutions for surplus. Pag masyadong marami, when you have too many people, pwede kang mag-hiring freeze. Okay? Huwag ka munang mag-hire, and then kapag meron mga nag-resign, nag-retire, yan, huwag kang mag-hire, yung mga extra sila yung ilagay mo doon para ma-reduce yung headcount without active termination, mga ganyan. Okay. Redeployment, you transfer excess employees from overstaffed units to understaffed areas. Voluntary separation program, offer incentives for employees to resign or to take early retirement para ma-reduce yung headcount, pero ginagawa mo pa rin siya in a very humane manner without forcing layoff. Okay, reduce work hours or job sharing, reduce yung shift hours or divide one full-time role between two employees. And then, pwede rin mag-retrain ka for new functions. I-reskill mo yung mga surplus employees for newly created roles in expanding branches. Okay? So, yan. So the key here is matching the right solution to your specific gap, timeline, budget, and org culture. Because no single solution is always best. It's still based on context, strategic fit na kailangan ng isang organization. Okay, so here's the example of the PACE solution timeline for Cafe Cordillera. So, hindi minsanan yung pag-hire niya, pagre-recruit niya. It's a combination of internal development, external hiring. Yan yung pagtitignan nyo tong solution for Cafe Cordillera. Okay? Alright. So, we're done with the workforce planning. Okay? So, let's bring all this together. Yung Unit 3 taught us about workforce planning, which is a systematic process that ensure organizations have the 5 rights. Yeah? Having the right people in the right roles, okay, at the right time, the right kind, the right skills, with the right cost. Mga ganyan. So, always remember that. Okay, so we have discussed also yung 7-step process, but the key steps there are the following: supply forecasting, demand forecasting, gap analysis, and solution analysis. Okay? And then, nakita natin dito yung ginamit natin yung case ni Marisol, who wants to expand 3 branches, and based on the HRP process, ang available na supply niya for 2027 is 9. Ang demand is 36. Mayroong gap na 27. And then we provided solutions. Okay? Kapag mayroong mga labor shortage based on the demand or based on the gap from our demand and our supply. So without HRP, Marisol would have faced the following challenges or issues. So yung HRP help Marisol transform Cafe Cordillera dun sa kanyang expansion from risky guesswork into a data-driven execution. Okay? So, hindi enough pala na pag mag-expand ka, hindi ibig sabihin na mag-hire ka na mag-hire na lang yung pinaka main solution. Okay? So, pwede nating gamitin ang human resource planning to reveal exactly yung specific na actions na gagawin natin, specific na number of employees needed, okay, so that we could create a more strategic approach in determining manpower needs and preparing our organization and our operation or business to accurately and efficiently create our plan and develop strategies and actions para hindi tayo magkaroon ng maraming issues down the road, especially when Marisol will open now her new branches in Baguio and La Trinidad. Okay? And this is where our unit will end. And in Unit 4, we will still be with Marisol because sa Unit 4, dun pa rin mag-i-start. Doon pa mag-i-start yung journey ni Marisol. Okay? So, yung ginawa natin is more on a systematic preparation. Di ba? So, workforce planning is not just about predicting the future perfectly. It's about preparing for it systematically so that when the future arrives, we already have the people in place to meet it. Okay? So, in Unit 4, ang gagawin na natin ngayon dito is mas prepared na si Marisol on how to find, how to evaluate kung sino yung mga mag-a-apply sa kanya, sino yung pipiliin niya, at paano niya i-develop, i-bring in yung mga bagong empleyado na mga hire niya para mag-take off yung kanyang 3 branches. Okay, so yan yung Unit for Talent Acquisition. So thank you so much for watching and for staying with me throughout this entire discussion. I hope that the story of Marisol will have made workforce planning real and meaningful for you. So maraming salamat and I will see you in Unit 4, Talent Acquisition. Okay, God bless everyone.